Will this mentally and emotionally scar me? Perhaps. Am I ready for it? Yeah, I think so. Buckle in, hunker down, and watch some Warhammer. I'm happy. It's been a little bit since we've gotten into some Warhammer content. I think Daemonculaba will describe how Chaos Space Marines are made. So, let's watch. Get your popcorn. Also, thank you, Luton, for the video. Woohoo! In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. He must put a white cloak upon his soul, that he might climb down into the filth to fight, yet may he die a saint.
So for today, I wanted to follow on from the last thing we covered, which was birth in the Imperium. While we could undoubtedly elaborate a little further on the other races, there is one area that cannot be ignored or forgotten. Now, be forewarned as well, this is right up there as one of the absolutely most fucked up things in 40k. Some may find the descriptions enduring and unpleasant. If you're uncomfortable hearing horrific details of the most abhorrent entities in the galaxy of 40k, this one might be a pass. However, that's very likely none of you. But I've said my piece, so now we can learn about the Daemonculaba. And of course, this relates to Chaos. And you might think to yourself, why would Chaos need birthing in the first place? Demons and their odd entities are made from war.
This is definitely one of those situations where if it's that fucked up, really makes you wonder who the writer is and what else they've written. What do you fear more, the orcs or the Tyranids? That's a tough question. Do I fear the orcs or the Tyranids more? I think I fear the Tyranids more. The idea of them running away from something larger than them freaks me out. Or that they are just like a never-ending wave. And also, their intelligence is freaky. Alright, back to the fucked upness.
Material, Chaos Space Marines are the unholy children of the Emperor, now doomed to eternal existence within the warp unless they're crusading into real space. Their lives extended well beyond already ordinary mortality, yet still able to be obliterated from existence when facing glorious warriors of the Imperium. Chaos cultists are usually just parodies of humanity, but still human in all the ways that count, and for some of the time anyway, until things just start to get really weird. So where and who and why is birth necessary within Chaos? Well, it's complicated. And by the way, the blame of such horrors as the Daemonculaba lay at the feet of the failings of the Imperial Fists chapter Astartes. Worth keeping that one in mind, because this is all connected with the world of Hydra Caudatus that you will recall I covered in my recent worst defeats of the Imperium. This is in part why it was such a failing, because its post-battle consequences are beyond most mortal comprehension. You see, the issues surrounding what occurs within the Chaos Legions is complicated. For one thing, the Imperium is not especially capable of keeping track of all things the traitors are up to in their horrific non-reality. Beyond that, it's fairly specific depending on who you're talking about, and I'm going to again gloss over a few things here, but you'll get the core idea. So Chaos Marines...
Ew! I just noticed! These guys are like... Their skin is being held up by a bunch of strings. It's like their back skin or something. And this guy does he have a head? Maybe. I can't see it. Alright.
In how they would have been affected by chaos. Some have given themselves over entirely to one sect or god of chaos. Examples of this would be the Death Guard and Nurgle, or the Thousand Sons Rubric Marines of Tzeentch, the World Eater Berserkers of Khorne, and the Slaaneshi Marines of the Emperor's Children. Now, all of these legions were affected differently, but as I haven't covered these in detail yet, this is why I say I'll gloss over it. Suffice to say though, most of you will know that Death Guard Marines are horribly bloated. They're literally walking piles of corpse flesh, disease and foul corruption. They're about as far away from a
Disgusting.
well-constructed mortal marine as you could get. Similarly, the rubric marines of the Thousand Suns, their armor is essentially sealed and all that's left inside of them is dust. They're animated by sorcerers, so again, not much is happening in terms of gene seed. But as I say, it is specific for the rubric marines because of their nature. They are in many ways closer to the warp, and so it's believed that if they're killed in battle and their armor is collected and resealed, then their spirits are somehow able to be relinked via rituals to guide them from the warp back to their armor. To explain this in detail, we have to rake through the history of the Thousand Suns, but the
Death
abridged
Guard
version
Asmon's
is that the
finest.
Thousand Suns never had a stable gene seed to begin with. When they arrived at their new Chaos homeworld in the Eye of Terror, their mutational tendencies took hold like nothing they'd ever seen before, and in an attempt to stop this, one of their most powerful sorcerers, Araman, performed rituals to stop and reverse this. Unfortunately, it only partially worked. It secured and even empowered some of the competent and more powerful sorcerers, but for the rest of the less psychically familiar Marines, it all but destroyed them, sealing their armor and turning their physical selves into dust. The Thousand Suns are one of the more decimated legions and few in number because of this whole affair and for some other reasons as well. But because of this, they're far less likely to be able to easily repopulate their legion. However, it's conceivable that they could recruit new Marines by turning loyalists traitor, and then these Marines may be more stable than the Thousand Suns originally were, or Tzeentch could forcibly ravage their form too. The Thousand Suns also draw powerful psykers from other Chaos legions and amalgamate them into their ranks. They may even use cultists who show some promise, converting them into aspiring sorcerers. They're often destroyed in the process, but some will make it through to become new psychic warriors. The point is, though, that many of the Marines closely affiliated with the Chaos Gods have a difficult time acquiring new Marine stock. It's not to say that they cannot do it. Usually they will achieve the creation of new base Marines by stealing gene seed from loyalist chapters. Though
One thing that I really liked about the Space Marine 2 game is the clip that consistently pops up on my TikTok is when the Dreadnought comes in and he asks for Magnus himself. Is Magnus here? And then there's that bird. I don't know what you'd call that. That bird that flies in, a drake of some sort. It lands and the Dreadnought picks up a giant piece of concrete and he's just like, cast you down, vile creature. It was a hell drake? Okay. Yeah, that's always such an awesome clip. That was one of my favorite parts of the game too. And whenever it pops up on my feed, I'm like, oh, I will never skip this. It's just, it's amazing. Nice fan art. Those two angels are actually from the show Hannibal. Oh, the ones with the guys and their flayed skin. Bleh. Bleh. The Vikings, when they did the Blood Eagle, I think that involved you would flay the skin, but isn't it where they would open up the ribs? It wasn't just the skin. They would actively like I think it was in the show Vikings, if I remember correctly. Yes, while they were alive, yeah. Oh, and pull the lungs out. Oh, yeah.
use this uncorrupted gene seed to form the new Marines before later twisting them to better fit with their new affiliations. Another occurrence can be loyalist chapters who venture into the warp, and they themselves can then discover that they have become somehow horribly mutated as the strange workings within the warp discover the flaws within their own gene seed. Such base-level corruption has left multiple successor chapters facing the horrific conclusion that they have little choice to either destroy themselves or join the darkness. How much of that decision is through whispered coaxing on the winds of the warp is difficult to say.
Blue screen of death?
Marines,
What
it's
the?
been said, do use their gene seed no matter how mutated, and use this to convert new prospective Marines, presumably because they are already so distorted and abhorrent beyond all imagination, so it makes little odds what they inject into the poor new aspirants. It's an uncomfortable thought to even go down the road of thinking what horrors an aspirant of the Death Guard would go through. It was bad enough before they turned to Chaos, having to drink foul poisons along with typical Space Marine testing, but to join the Nurgle Death Guard, that would be a hard pass from me. When the traitor Chaos Legions were chased into the Eye of Terror, they left behind a lot more than their honour and reputations, indeed their souls. The traitor Marine Legions had not really planned for failure. Horus's crusade had led them down a path that seemed to lead to inevitable victory, so the prospect of not being able to locate material for or creating new Marines just had not occurred to them. Now granted, the Chaos Marines retained their Legion's size, even if many of them were decimated as they fled to the Eye of Terror, and so by the end of it they still had many thousands of Marines. But over the millennia, it's inevitable that losses would be felt. The problem facing them was how to replenish their forces, along with the fact that their gene seed had been corrupted by the warp and the gods, so producing stable new Marines was extremely problematic, if not impossible. A continuing tried and tested formula for acquiring new Marines for the Chaos Forces is still recruitment from loyalist Space Marines.
When I was getting into Warhammer, I guess it was just something that I didn't really think about in terms of how Chaos Marines are made. I just assumed that when they fought loyalist Marines, they would kidnap them, or they would just fall to chaos, and they fell to chaos at a rate that was enough to where they didn't need to find other ways of reproducing Chaos Marines, or I don't know. I didn't really think about it. You're correct, Miss Powder. Those are the main ways that Chaos Marines replenish their numbers: conversion and stolen gene seeds. Okay, that's the main way. All right.
While the heresy has been over 4 millennia, this does not stop bands of renegade Marines joining with the Chaos Forces. Their views on the operation of Astartes in the Imperium slowly twisted over many years. Some feel no loyalty to the Emperor or to their brothers whatsoever, and so are content to serve only their own needs. Over time, this almost inevitably leads to them turning to the darkness of chaos in one way or another. Some survive as mercenaries, but it's always a slippery slope. Lastly, sometimes the traitors succeed in stealing genetic material known as gene seed from pure loyalists. Examples of this would be the Imperial Fist's defense collapsing on Hydra Caudatus, where their stockpile of gene seed was pillaged. Chaos Marines can use this in different ways. Fabius Bile, a very famous Chaos Marine, a bizarre dark biologist and genetic engineer, is said to have unlocked the secrets of Astartes and even Primarch engineering. How much truth there is to such claims remains unsubstantiated, yet this theft of uncorrupted genetic material leads us into the segue for our main topic. For what many agree is the very worst and most abhorrent fate that exists in the 41st millennium, the DAEMONCULABA. We only get glimpses of what awaits the poor human souls captured by chaos or stranded on worlds within the Eye of Terror. Nearly always, it's nothing as serene and simple as the release of death. The DAEMONCULABA are truly horrific, but not just in the means or manner of birth, but the entire process from start to finish.
The downward spiral.
Originally, they were seen in a vision by the powerful Ultramarines librarian Tigurius, which some speculate was granted to him by the Emperor, who described the bizarre creations appearing to him on a world tasting of dark iron, with womb factories of demonic flesh rippling with monstrous unnatural life. Dark morticians who would hack at these creatures with blade and saw to pull blood-soaked figures from the wombs. These were the dark mirror image of the Astartes, debased Space Marines. All Tigurius knew was that these abominations must be destroyed. Two Ultramarines, Uriel Ventris and Brother Pausanias, who had broken their faith in the Codex Astartes, were cast out by the Ultramarines and bound by a death oath to seek out the horrors on the planet of Medanguard, home of the traitor legion of the Iron Warriors, and the DAEMONCULABA, who were shuttered away in darkness, away from the sight of mankind, formed by madness and despair. Now, Chaos Marines like the Night Lords are well known to brutalise human captives to forge links to the warp through their unceasing torment. Sometimes this means literally flaying them alive, and various methods of torturous agony drawn out for as long as possible. Here on Medanguard, the Marines found similar nightmares. After their journey to the planet, which I'll make an aside did have demonic assistance in getting there, they were searching around and exploring the world they found themselves in. They discovered a raised platform. It had a grilled surface, the floor around it covered in what appeared to be scraps of flesh and fat, bodily fluids, all manner of remains. Clearly, some harrowing scene had played out here, and they soon were able to guess as to what. They noticed the wind catching huge sheets that were stretched and hooked to raised poles all around the site. These huge sheets, which took the appearance of massive sails, were made from some kind of flesh leather. Bizarre mutated humanoid creatures wearing rubber masks and round glass eye sockets were scraping, curing these strung-up leathers. But the size of these vast leather sheets led the Marines to conclude that they could at least not be human, something they were grateful for knowing. Still, the anger of witnessing such inhuman horrors led the Marines to butcher these mutant animals like the wretched, worthless things that they were, and in moments they lay cut in two, decapitated, or just burning corpse wrecks left into the ground. Yet they noted among the slaughtered remains some of the leathery skins that were being cured lay on the ground as well, and the discomfort rose in them as they saw at the top of the stripped skin hide the features of what had once been a human man, stretched to disgusting proportions. The thought of how such a form could be achieved and harvested sickened them to their core. The Marines left the site of horror burning, the promethium from their flamers incinerating the scene behind them that was so foul and offensive to the whole of humanity. The Ultramarines progressed forward.
Did you just say moisturizer? What the? Kill it before it lays eggs. Oh my gosh. Moisturizer.
On this descent of a journey down into the darkest circles of the creations of the warp, their hatred and desire for vengeance increasing constantly as they thought of the indescribable torment and agony the human individuals who ended up in such a place had to endure at the hands of such foul mutant scum. Soon they came upon another camp. This time they saw living slave humans being marched around into pens, and they appeared to be wearing or covered in baggy hanging robes that were coloured like flesh. However, the Marines soon discovered that these were not robes, but the poor captured humans were in fact naked, and that somehow they'd had the skin of their bodies stretched beyond any normal size. They carried huge folds of skin that hung from their bodies, bellies hung loosely from their ruined skeletal forms, their destination, a platform similar to the one they had seen earlier, where they would undoubtedly be skinned alive.
What?
They saw that the camp was guarded by Iron Warrior traitor Marines and more of the bizarre mutant creatures. After a brief engagement aided by mysterious...
What the fuck is the Daemonculaba? Is this a book? Is this a planet? Is this... What is a way of life? What the... We're just starting? Oh my god.
The Marines, the camp was secured and cleared of the traitors. The slave humans were left wailing and consoling each other as they slumped into the ground, surrounded by their vastly stretched folded skins, and they were a sad, pitiful sight to behold. The mysterious Marines who had aided them in clearing the site were, it turned out, to be renegade Marines. However, it should be said, a renegade Marine need not be corrupted by chaos, but those who are corrupted by chaos are deemed by the Imperium to also be renegades. The two Ultramarines were horrified to discover the renegade Marines had not sought to save the poor human souls that were scattered around the camp sobbing, but simply to come and destroy this place. The renegade explained to them how most humans never survived to reach this stage of skin harvesting, but the ones who did would wish they had not. They were confused as to what function such a place could serve, even to corrupted Marines. The Renegade's answer was for them to see for themselves. As they entered the darkened warehouses of the camp with its barely functioning lighting, hanging chains and mechanisms that filled the place were oiled and greased all over. Meshed cages sat atop raised platforms, each filled with a mass of flesh. Pipes and tubing fed into them from sacks hanging above. The air was thick with the stench of human waste and body fluids, and millions of tiny flies were thick as they fed upon the sickly waste. The Marines approached a cage to find something living inside that had once been a man, but to call him such now would be a horrific joke. Bloated, swollen with fat, his skin was shiny like ripened fruit, but paled like a rotting corpse. The man-thing's mouth was clamped open to allow industrial...
Just kill him. Yeah, this is how I want to spend my Wednesdays. Heck yeah! Can't get any better than this. Anyone want jerky? Actually, jerky sounds really good. Jerky sounds really good right now, and it's not human jerky, but I do like jerky a lot. I could probably eat jerky and watch this at the same time and be okay. Ever tasted human before? In what way? I don't know how to answer this question. I'll say yes. I have tasted human before. But I have not bitten off a piece of flesh and swallowed it, if that's what you're asking. This is awful, by the way. This is when, like, you just see someone like this and you just gotta shoot them because they need to be put out of their misery.
And fruit, but paled like a rotting corpse. The man-thing's mouth was clamped open to allow industrial tubing feeding him directly to his stomach. Other wires and bioplugs were dotted around his chest, presumably regulating his organs to prevent him succumbing to death too soon. The limbs were barely recognizable as such as they merged into the mounds of flesh and folds of skin. His eyes were rolled and disconnected. His mind had long been since lost, its ability for rational and conscious thought gone. Other cages were much the same. Men and women held captive, tortured beyond anything the Astartes had ever witnessed before. Some were clearly in a vegetative state, but others were more traumatically clinging still to their consciousness, their eyes locked with the Marines. Even for them, it was enough to make them want to look away from imagining the horror these individuals had endured for unknown lengths of time.
Burn
The
them.
seemed to have also undergone further punishment. Their bellies were heavily scarred, often stitched, as if they had been repeatedly suffering surgery. The Astartes, iron-willed as they were, couldn't look at this any longer, turning away from the visions that would scar their memories, doubtless for decades. They explored further, having already seen so much they needed to uncover what was going on here. More cages held human-like figures, but again, they were parodies of the human form, splayed and stretched, and these figures were hung up, and in contrast to the former, they were unfed, seemingly starving, but tubes were similarly keeping them in a state of undeath, while simultaneously sucking the fat from their bodies. The grim, dark reality of the situation became obvious to the Astartes. These humans were being forcibly fattened so that their bodies would be engorged to the point they might appear to burst, and if they didn't die from this process or the grossly disproportionate levels of fat, they'd then be vacuumed clean, leaving them in a nightmarish state of wearing a foul, hanging skin suit, then finally paraded outside in a zombie-like state of living before having it cut from their bodies and cured by the bizarre mutant horrors. The Marines were overcome with anger, pity, and revulsion. Who or what could envisage such horrors, and to what purpose could it possibly serve? The renegade Marines were none the wiser and looked on dispassionately, only explaining that the Iron Warriors had built many camps like this. It only mattered that they seemed important to the traitors, and so this is why they sought to destroy them. And as they left this place destroying the site, the Astartes took in the scale of it. At least 24 warehouses, each a place of unending horror for those confined to its torments. They left it burning and retreated to the relative safety of the surrounding mountains of Medanguard.
Very good.
Later, the two Ultramarines would encounter the Renegade's bunker HQ. Some battle-worn Imperial Guardsmen were there, along with many other Astartes. The Guardsmen, though, would reveal that they came from, that's right, Hydra Caudatus, and it was here that, much to the horror of the Ultramarines, they discovered that the Imperial Fist gene seed had been stored on this world, and that due to the failings of the Imperial Fist to prevent the city from being overrun by the traitors, this previous gene seed material had been stolen by the traitor warsmith Honsu, who would then proceed to bring this material, along with many thousands of Imperial slaves, here to the world of Medanguard. Uriel knew what he had to do. He would speak before the collected renegades, attempting to convince them that they should mount an all-out assault upon the fortress city of the Iron Warriors and the warsmith Honsu. He explained to them how it's clear, now that they knew of the theft of the Imperial Fist gene seed, that Honsu, via the DAEMONCULABA, sought to generate a new force of traitor Marines, and that this effort must be ended before it could begin. The renegades thought such a mission would be futile and suicidal. Uriel, the former Ultramarines captain, would exclaim that he had no more of a wish to die than any of them. He was the Emperor's servant, and he wanted to live a long life so that he'd be able to continue bringing death to the enemies of mankind for as many years as he was capable. The renegades were torn between this opportunity to redeem themselves in the eyes of the Emperor and the obviously high odds that were stacked firmly against their success, not to mention that their deaths seemed a foregone conclusion. The Imperial Guardsmen were first to pledge their service before any of the renegade Astartes had the chance, but one by one they stepped up to seize the opportunity to grasp the whisper of a chance to live as they once had, and be who they knew themselves truly to be, to live for the glorious battle in the name of the Emperor and unleash furious vengeance upon those who had poisoned and destroyed this former world of humanity. As they left the bunker to travel to the city of the traitors, They may have been a ramshackle bunch of marines and guardsmen, but they were now singularly focused and invigorated by their goal to destroy the Daemonculaba, slaughter as many Iron Warriors as possible, and kill the warsmith Honsu.
Very good.
They eventually would reach the fortress of Kalang Gaul, where it turned out Honsu was fighting something of an internal conflict against fellow warlords of the Iron Warriors. By good fortune for the renegade marines, a barrage split open the side of the fortress, enabling them to breach its walls, where the former captain of the Ultramarines, Uriel, would engage in close combat with Honsu and other Iron Warriors. They survived.
Iron Warriors. So, Iron Warriors, do they just worship like chaos in general? Like no super specific god? Or is it Khorne? Just chaos undivided? No. No chaos is cringe to them. They're not tied to a specific god. Iron Warriors don't really like chaos. They use chaos as a resource. Okay. They are Chaos Space Marines, not because they love the gods, but because fuck you. Okay, they just hate everything. Interesting.
Long enough to all make their way inside. The band of renegade marines would be nearly overcome as they travelled deeper into the fortress, chaotic whispers disturbing their minds.
Insane,
the fortress
okay.
seemed to ever encroach upon them, the deadening sky and the black sun always above them. Shadows crawled over the walls that seemed alive themselves, and they pressed ever more into the dark, claustrophobic streets of the fortress city. They searched for hours, but it was a labyrinth of streets that defied physics and reality. The band of marines would be nearly entirely slaughtered by an Iron Warrior known as Onyx, who had been hunting them under the orders of Warsmith Honsu. He would gruesomely tear their spines clean from at least 5 of the marines before Uriel was temporarily held by Onyx. Another marine of his band would free him by impaling him through the throat in an attempt to kill the corrupted Chaos Marine, but to no avail. More of the renegades would die before the filth and waste of the city itself somehow became animated by the chaotic powers that gave it some semblance of life, and under these black waves of filth they were carried off deeper into Kalang Gaul. After a brief interrogation with Honsu, Onyx would drag them into the bowels of Kalang Gaul, where they encountered more abominations. Figures stitched together from multiple bodies, faces and eyes replaced with rusting copper gratings who drawled as much as they spoke guttural, rasped distortions that passed for language. They descended in a cage elevator until they reached their destination, as they were to be handed into the care of the savage morticians, to be hacked, experimented upon and generally put through hellish torture. The savage morticians appeared to be bastardized versions of the Mechanicus as they scuttled around on crab-like limbs or stilted walking mechanisms. Their arms were a mixture of saws, blades, surgical instruments and any number of drills, clamps and other tools. Their bodies, if they had any at all, were ravaged with repeated surgical wounds, and the cavern was a bizarre place filled with cages similar to those in the camps they saw on the surface, where the flesh creatures, once human, were fattened then forcibly drained and skinned alive. There were many more such cages here, but the room was also awash with what appeared to be surgical tables and associated structures that lay throughout in a discarded, disorganized fashion. It was an unpleasant and foul mess. The stench of bodily fluids, blood, waste hung thick through the air. It never seemed to leave them on this world. Onyx and the Iron Warriors handed over the renegades to the savage morticians, who dragged away some of the marines. But Uriel, it seems, was to be given over to the Daemonculaba. As one of the renegades cried out what was to happen with them, the barely comprehensible clicking language.
It just seems like a little unnecessary what they're doing, I'm gonna be honest. So, the reason why they're doing all this gross, disgusting stuff is to fuel chaos, and then chaos in turn fuels them. Not really in this case. Their Iron Warriors are trying to make new Marines. A byproduct happens to be suffering. I see. I don't understand the whole, like, human flesh bags. That's all to reproduce? Why do they have just a bunch of hangy flesh slaves? That I don't understand. You will get it soon? Okay. Okay, sorry. I'm getting ahead of myself here. My bad. It all just seems a little much right now, but I know we're only 20 minutes in, so it's just gonna get worse.
language of these black-robed machine things, replied how they were the surgeons of demise, that they would be abacinated and then opened up to be harvested for whatever purposes they saw fit, making their flesh their own. Incidentally, abacination is where someone is blinded by the process of having a red-hot piece of metal held before your eyes, or historically this was performed by also using a corrosive chemical such as slaked lime, which would be poured into cups and strapped to someone's face so that the lime would eat away at the eyes.
Oh, great.
As Uriel was dragged off to his fate, he witnessed only further horror. Stripped down humans, their flesh ruined, prisoners sewn together, others screaming in sheer incomprehensible madness as fluids were being pumped through their skulls for whatever purpose, bursting out of their eye sockets. Others were being reassembled into new forms with limbs and who knows what attached to them for seemingly no reason. If ever there was a vision of what ancient humanity had called hell, this was certainly it. He was dragged up ramps and between cages, seeing more victims that resembled those from the skin-stretching death camps. But this was not the same. Being dragged along, it was difficult to catch a clear glimpse of what was contained within these cages, until he finally saw what abominations they contained. Horribly bloated, swollen beyond all recognition, but most certainly female. The vocal cords seemingly had been cut or removed to prevent what would have been unending screaming. Unlike the forms they'd seen previously, their bellies rippled and moved. They were large enough to contain something big enough to be a full-grown human, even the size of an Astartes. In horrifying realization, Uriel understood that these were the DAEMONCULABA, and even within they held these new growing forms blended from pure, uncorrupted seed. It was the most harrowing thing Uriel had ever witnessed.
Okay, the DAEMONCULABA are the women who have been stretched out and they birth the Chaos Marines. Okay.
All of these endless and unceasing horrors were too much. The compounding misery of fate he'd witnessed, abandonment of so many innocent humans that he'd wanted to save, but left to fates too grisly to ever tell of, the perversion of the corrupted traitors, and now this absolute unceasing nightmare, the agony, the despair, the madness. Uriel himself wept. Except he recalled his death oath, that if he succeeded, would see him restored as an Astartes. He attempted to break free from the strange surgical beast, which was now cutting his armor from his body. His protesting only resulted in being bludgeoned almost unconscious, but staring down through the metal grating that was the floor, he saw conveyors filled with dead traitor Astartes, who were being crushed and pulped into a paste-like material. Apparently this was the Iron Warriors' method to repurpose their gene seed, split with that of the Imperial Fist's stolen material, to the DAEMONCULABA as it was fed back through to them.
Oh,
Dragged back to his current situation, he looked around as he saw children being fed into the flesh chambers of the DAEMONCULABA, themselves struggling and crying as they'd be placed inside these hell wombs where the genetic material of the traitors would twist and corrupt them into newly formed soldiers of the Iron Warriors. Uriel was dragged into the wombs himself now, sutured into place, and he felt the warm darkness surround him. The chattering oddities of the morticians sealed him in, but not before explaining how he would die. Too old to become an Iron Warrior, gene seed will rupture your flesh, mutant growth, unknown results. You will be in pieces, into jars. Folds of soft blubbery flesh were covered over him, and he was trapped in a nightmare. Pulsating things shifted all around him, numbness spreading through his body. He became unconscious as he heard the friction of long threads stitching his surrounding womb shut. Meanwhile, the other renegade Marines were being clamped in place and dismembered. They learned that the skins that they'd seen being prepared on the mountains were used to clothe the newly birthed Marines of the DAEMONCULABA who were born without skin of their own. They would have this stretched flesh leather wrapped and stitched around them before becoming new Iron Warriors. And the unfleshed mutants they'd seen in the same place were the failed newborns from the process of the DAEMONCULABA. Most were reprocessed into material to be refed to the birthing monsters, but those who somehow survived struggled on, banished into the wastelands, where they scavenged like animals to survive, some employed by the Iron Warriors in the skin preparation camps. The renegade Marines cursed their abominable captors, but to no reaction or interest. Uriel by now was already struggling with his own lucid dreams confined to his living tomb. Opening his eyes up only caused them to be flooded by stinging fluids all around him. He could feel umbilicals invading his body, burrowing into him to connect with his nervous system. He was enveloped by amniotic jelly that poured into his mouth if he tried to scream, and he struggled, but his sutures held him fast, stitched to the flesh floor of this entrapment. An ever-pulsating, dizzying headache filled his mind, and his vision entirely blurred. He knew he couldn't have long before he had not enough strength to struggle, perhaps little conscious thought even. The pulsating thudding of circulation ringing in his ears, he was beginning to be unable to differentiate the sounds and feelings of his own body with that which he'd been
I want this inside of me.
Excuse me? There is something wrong with you.
Huh?
Something very wrong.
ringing in his ears. He was beginning to be unable to differentiate the sounds and
You too.
feelings of his own body with that which he'd been forcibly connected with. He had to escape. He thrust upward, and somehow his hand burst through the stitching taut skin of his flesh prison. The horror of this act in and of itself was hard enough to stomach, but as he battled to be free, ripping and tearing himself from the fat, the organic threads connected to him, and the inevitable pain he must have been inflicting on his host.
I don't know what this is, but it's kind of hot. Stitching taut skin of his flesh prison. The horror of this act in and of itself was hard enough to stomach, but as he battled to be free, ripping and tearing himself from the fat, the organic threads connected to him, and the inevitable pain he must have been inflicting on his host, it was enough to make him feel a sense of madness. He pulled himself out, vomiting the jelly-like fluids that had poured into him. He was in a foul state. The air, while rancid and acrid, seemed clean and fresh to him after the claustrophobic, suffocating cell of his living incarceration. Fighting off a mutant guard who came rushing in a panic, unexpecting to see their Astartes bursting out from the Daemonculaba, he dodged and disarmed, killing them with ease, but only to then collapse into coughing, weeping, enraged, screaming. The entire ordeal was breaking him, but upon hearing the screams of his fellow renegade Marines, he set off to rush to their aid, for they were still suffering at the hands of their murderous captors. Uriel leapt to join in an assault already begun by his brother Ultramarine and a former Raven Guard. The bizarre mutations of the Dark Mechanicus had already been partially battered into submission. Uriel finished the job despite his blurry, weakened state of mind. While the renegade Raven Guard abandoned them to save his own life, the two Ultramarines sought to free whoever was left alive, including two severely traumatized guardsmen.
Raven Guard! What the? I mean, I also, like, I kind of get it. Like, it's pretty bad. You know, but also like his buddies, you know, like
The only way out of the hellish world was through the rivers of surgical waste and pulped afterbirth, as well as the aborted Astartes.
They
so
are
they waded
renegade.
through the tunnels flying with body parts and rotting material. They rushed in the vain hope of escape to the outside, but more bizarre mechanical morticians were after them. As the tunnel continued to descend, they soon lost their footing and were being flushed down through the fetid, stinging stream of liquid. They were swept over a colossal waterfall of disposed organics, dead-eyed half-bodies, pulped flesh, and despite fighting to escape it, Uriel was carried over the edge. Somehow they had weathered the ordeal of jagged rocks and a torrent of body parts dragging them down, but the Imperial Guard sergeant had been severely wounded and was now cradled by his colonel. Both of them by now held the respect of the Astartes, but it was a sorrowful state they found themselves in. But regardless, now was not the time for melancholy. They needed to get out of here.
right.
The Iron Warrior warsmith Honsu was more than incensed by their escape. The Dark Morticians were even more bemused about how Uriel had managed to tear himself free, yet even as they spoke, the Daemonculaba, despite having no voice, still managed a distorted wailing as it was apparently ready to birth one of its offspring. The Mortician cut at its cracking, bleeding wound as a heavy blood-soaked thing poured out unceremoniously onto the grated metal floor. Shivering and coated with stinging residue, the Dark Mortician held the skinless man-child thing aloft. He would be wrapped in mortal skin and clothed by a betraying Iron Warrior's armor. He was now a newborn Chaos Space Marine. The renegades, though, had now been surrounded by the unfleshed. Their fate had seemed all but sealed, except that a larger failed birth thing that Uriel himself titled Lord of the Unfleshed, who seemed more conscious and competent judging by his accompanying figures, had the strength of a dreadnought and crushingly held up Uriel. The thing declared that he had the taste and the scent of the mother, and seemingly this was enough to convince these other odd discarded fleshless humanoids that the Marines were much like themselves, failed experiments cast down from the Daemonculaba chamber.
What
They were led
the?
to the nest of the fleshless things, whereupon they discovered only more misery, huge piles of twisted, ruined flesh things, some in a state of consciousness, others comatose and dying. They were deformed beyond recognition, and some dragged themselves around here and there, others lay in rusting pools of fluid, unable to move at all, but still.
This is like what I imagine with like Made in Abyss, you know, when they descend, and then they try to make it back up. That's kind of like what's in my mind. Or like, what is it, MIDI, from Made in Abyss. It's kind of giving me that vibe. Bleh.
Conscious. It was a pitiful and dismal discovery, but by now, all that they had come to expect from this wretched planet and its inhabitants.
I've been told it's good, but never watched it because they looked too young. Hello, Powder. Hi, Jesus. We need some Jesus today. Made in Abyss. The first season is good. I like the world. It's a good story, but the person who wrote Made in Abyss definitely hard side eye. There's a little too many pissing stuff going on here, and children wetting themselves, and it's like, okay. It was like the epitome of the author's poorly disguised fetish. For sure. For sure. What part of 40k lore? Oh no, yeah, okay. Yeah, no, Demonculaba. Flesh bag, womb things, women, whatever they are, I don't even know. They're just like things. So the way that they work is you can just beat an iron warrior into a pulp, like put them into a NutriBullet with a gene seed, and then put them in this womb, and then they'll pop out as a newborn Iron Warrior. Like, it's like they're mixing the DNA, and yeah, it's like chaos smoothies. So what were they doing with this guy? They were putting him in this womb, but he's already a full-fledged dude. So like, would it somehow turn him into an Iron Warrior? Is that the idea? They put him in this womb to turn him into an Iron Warrior, and it didn't work out because he obviously fought his way out, but biomass, I guess? Okay. I think they were breaking him down to make more Iron Warriors. Oh, okay. So in the womb, they can break him down. Grind the dead Marines plus the gene seed into a pulp. Feed the pulp to the Demonculaba. Put child inside the womb. Child mutates to Astartes without skin. When ready and taken out of the womb, they are clothed in the stretched skin. New Marine. They stuck Uriel there to see what happens. It's like, they were just like, whoa, what's gonna happen? Let's just put him in there. Oh my god. Okay. So that was the reason. Okay. Wow. Yeah, the people with the fleshy skin bags hanging off of their bodies and using as like a cape or a tarp or something. That is, yeah, I get it now. It makes sense. They use that as their skin. Like, holy shit, there's no better way to reproduce. Like, this is the way this is, what the fuck? All in the name of science, yeah. There's still a chance that the process will fail. Yeah, as we're seeing here, we're actually at the part where it does fail because he escaped, and now he's like in the fleshy pit of fleshy people things, and oh, so bad. Whew, okay. We're in 30 minutes. We're doing okay. We're doing okay. Oh my god.
Yet it soon unfolded that they had not yet been judged to be included with the group of fleshless things. They simply had brought them here to decide whether or not to kill them. While the horrors decided the fate of the Marines, their own willpower and ideologies had been, after all they'd seen and survived through, stretched to breaking point. The Raven Guard, who was already barely convinced by Uriel that their mission to destroy the Daemonculaba was a good idea, had easily had enough of this folly of an affair. They barely escaped with their lives and lost brothers in the process. Uriel and Pausanias, though, had been sworn to a death oath by Manias Calgar, and nothing would sway their determination, no matter the nightmares that they had already endured at the hands of Honsu and the Dark Morticians. Despite the Raven Guard all but stating he would abandon Uriel, the two other Imperial Guardsmen had managed to somehow survive this far, but by now the sergeant's wounds were too severe. He died, and the colonel exclaimed how it was not right that he should have to die in such a dark place. But Uriel reminded him that it was the manner in which he lived that was the true mark of a warrior, and that his courage would surely ensure his place at the Emperor's side. The colonel nodded and agreed. Not only this, but he pledged himself to Uriel's mission to return to the fortress and destroy the Daemonculaba. Uriel was overcome with admiration. This lone human soldier, his belief and courage so strong that he would pledge himself to this former captain without hesitation. What exceptional individuals the Imperium of Man had forged from the Emperor's hand.
Very nice.
This gloriously invigorating moment of pride was interrupted by the slow clapping of the Raven Guard Astartes, declaring them all fools and that they would surely meet their futile deaths in this ongoing pointless quest. Uriel snapped at the Raven Guard. Silence! You are not a space marine anymore. You are not even a man. You are a coward and a traitor.
Oh,
But just as they were about to come to blows, the Lord of the Unfleshed returned, and they were to learn of their fate, which was to be determined, strangely, by the Emperor. They were led through to a chamber, whereupon they discovered the most bizarre of sights. In this long since abandoned factory, they found a statue that resembled the Emperor of Man. 20 meters tall, filthy, rusted and adorned with beaten metal panels, chains and wings of stained metal protruding from its back. Uriel considered that despite its pitiful absurdity, it was somehow impressive that such mindless humanoid horrors had constructed this idol out of whatever materials they had lain around the ruined manufactorum. Despite the other Marines' obvious revulsion at such a sight, Uriel considered it was strange and sad, yet a part of him felt true pity for these mutant fleshless figures, who were, after all, the product of gene seed not unlike their own. These creatures had obviously failed in their conversion to Chaos Marines, but even deeper than that, they had somehow retained a core strength in them. They had retained somehow a belief and a worship of the Emperor. It was as disturbing as it was touching. Had this been a part of their genetic material, or was it more tragic? That all that remained from the children entombed in the flesh hells of the Daemonculaba, all that allowed them to survive, was the unending strength that came from their belief in the Emperor of Mankind. They remembered his love and his protection. It was a tragedy beyond words. Despite all they had endured, they still saw fit to construct this idol of the Emperor so that he might watch over them and protect them from the minions of Chaos on Medanguard. The Lord of the Unfleshed had decided, and they were ready to throw Uriel into their great dark pit, along with his renegade band. But as he was tossed against the statue of the Emperor, somehow it was activated into a beacon of light. Whatever it was that was held within this ancient machinery stunned the Unflesh, and soon they agreed that Uriel had the love of the Emperor. They had no wish to know what they were. They had the minds of children. They hated themselves and their form, but they loved the Emperor. They simply knew not what they should do. They were frustrated and agonized by what they were and by the Iron Men who they hated more than anything. Uriel had them on his side now. No more should be born from the Flesh Mother, the Unfleshed would say. We did nothing. We do not deserve this.
Revolution!
Uriel knew where they all needed to go. The Iron Warriors meanwhile continued their bizarre war amongst themselves, fighting over the scraps of the gene seed stolen from Hydra Caudatus. But by now, Uriel with his band of renegades and flesh things were making their way back into the mountain fortress.
What a
The
sight.
renegade Raven Guard made a last attempt to sway Uriel from his death oath quest, but Uriel by now had abandoned all hope for this pitiful excuse for an Astartes. Meanwhile, the Iron Warriors were blasting a cataclysmic breach into the fortress. Uriel and his entourage felt the shockwave from this immense explosion. Stunned by its power, the Unfleshed declared the Emperor was clearly angry at Iron Men, for he strikes at them from heaven, to which Uriel agreed. But the Raven Guard and other renegade Marines had abandoned them by now, much to his bitter frustration. Only Brother Pausanias and the Colonel now stood with him in his death oath to destroy the Daemonculaba. He suddenly caught sight of the renegades as they departed, and while he knew they may have been right that their fate was inevitable death, he had been assigned this death oath by the chapter master himself, and he knew that true warriors of the Imperium knew no fear of death, only fear that they may die with unfinished objectives to complete. No matter the truth of the renegade Marine's words, he knew their choice was the right one. With the aid of the unfleshed, they made good time, and advanced to enter the fortress of Kalang Gaul once again. Uriel, however, after a time saw two of the warring titans between the Iron Warriors fall, and the battle appeared to fade. What had happened? Honshu, as it happened, had succeeded in crushing the assaulting Iron Warriors and killing their commander. He hoped to bring them to his own force, tempting these Iron Warriors that they might share in his spoils and the strength through the gene seed and Daemonculaba. Their only way in now to the fortress was through deception. Uriel realised that the huge battle that had taken place gave them the perfect opportunity, and he managed somehow to get the unfleshed to understand this. The juggernaut bulldozers that he'd seen pushing vast mountains of dead flesh into the processing plant of the dark morticians below the fortress gave him the ideal opportunity. Lying down with the dead, they would be pushed exactly to where they needed to be, while their enemies would be none the wiser. It took them over an hour to be pushed amid the mountains of bodies into the depths of the savage morticians and Iron Warriors' Daemonculaba chamber. Uriel and his two companions came up with a simple plan to wreck the machinery and kill as many Daemonculaba as possible before they themselves were killed. A simple plan, but with few other options considering there were only 3 of them. However, before they were able to even move out, the unfleshed came into a roaring state of an enraged awakening. Ripping and biting mutant servants of the morticians in two, they had begun their murderous rampage of vengeance. Uriel and Co realised any advantage from stealth had been lost. They needed to get on with this if they were going to do it and succeed. As they prepared to destroy the pulping machine with a bandolier of grenades, they came across the mutilated form of one of the Iron Warriors formerly serving Honshu. This Chaos Marine was known as Obax, yet here he was, strung up. Most of his flesh stripped away from his body, his limbs had been amputated. The savage morticians had stripped him bare. The warsmith Honshu had condemned him to their whims after he saw through the charade of Obax, who had been operating as an agent of one of Honshu's enemy Iron Warriors outside the fortress. Obax begged for the Marines and the Imperial Guard colonel to kill him, but Uriel had no interest. Obax continued to beg in his despair, so brutally ruined was he, plugged in by various tubes which were fed chemicals to keep him alive. "Please," he begged, "kill me. They feed me to the machine and make me watch." The Imperial Guard colonel Leonid went to put this wretch out of his misery, but then stopped. "Why should you get off so easy after you tortured so many of my soldiers to death? I think I like the idea of you suffering like this." Obax exclaimed that he could help them defeat Honshu, and after Uriel agreed to kill him and end his misery, Obax laid out what they must do. Now, in this abridged version of events, I largely omitted details about the demons from the tale because by and large it has minimal impact to what we needed to cover here, but suffice to say, 2 demons who have a deep-rooted hate for one another are at play in the story. Obax reveals to the Ultramarine Uriel that the demon they sought to destroy here would enable the Iron Warriors who wished the destruction of Honshu and the securement of the fortress, that by releasing the demon of blood and skulls trapped below the ground here in the chamber with the Daemonculaba would enable the forces of Lord Toromino, the sworn enemy of Honshu, outside to lash the Bastion fortress with their powerful psychic warriors and raise this place. Uriel and Brother Pausanias set off to accomplish their task, and their spirits were lifted that they might do far more damage than kill a few of the pitifully wretched Daemonculaba, but instead succeed in destroying the entire fortress and this cruel master. Leonid was left with the task of putting Obax out of his misery. The Ultramarines gave him some parting words of wisdom to remain close to the unfleshed creatures, for they would do their best to protect him. The Dark Morticians were coming soon, and with that the Astartes were gone. Colonel Leonid looked over the wretched body of Obax. His kind had inflicted unending suffering on men and women, just like him. Never showing any sign that this was something they disapproved of, Obax ordered the colonel to kill him, while referring to him still as a slave. Colonel Leonid shot Obax in the gut with his lasgun. He saw the pain on the crippled Chaos Marine, and it felt good. Obax roared now. "Shoot me again!" Leonid stepped closer and spat into Obax's face. "No," he said calmly. "An oath was given," screamed the Iron Warrior. "Uriel Ventress swore he would see me dead." "Uriel gave his word, but I didn't," snarled Leonid. "I want you to live in agony, then die in pain when this place is brought down." The Iron Warrior Obax wept and cursed him, but Leonid
ignored his pleadings as he removed the grenade attached to the crushing machine that was nearest the Iron Warrior and slipped it into his uniform's breast pocket. "Don't want you dying by accident now, do we?" he said. Without another word, Leonid turned and walked away. As Uriel and Pausanias attempted to free the Demon of Khorne, they were once again forced to endure the sights of the DAEMONCULABA. There's not enough suffering in the galaxy to make the Iron Warriors pay for what they have done here. No, agreed Uriel, but we will make them suffer anyway.
The Iron Warriors are fighting among themselves? Interesting. They're not very united, I suppose. They don't like anybody. They don't even like themselves. Called chaos for a reason. That's fair. That's fair. I guess I assume some order in chaos, but I guess I was wrong to think that.
Both of them were still choked with emotion by the abject horrors of this place, something no one should have to endure, see, or ever imagine could even exist. Meanwhile, the Colonel and the Unfleshed fought bravely on, but the dark morticians and waves of enslaved mutants bore down on them, and Leonid knew the glorious feeling of firing his lasgun in battle once again. He even saved the Lord of the Unfleshed by sniping off the head of one of the dark machine creatures, but he knew their fate and that it would be coming soon. Yet by now, Uriel had unleashed the ancient demon. They were finally able to remove its wards and chains, and as it reared up and lightning lashed around it, they wondered if they had done the right thing. The demon, known as the Heart of Blood, was now on a rampage of vengeance that defies description. Its rage beyond rage, eyes white fires of madness, the lake of blood it had been held captive in, boiled around the great demon.
Oh god. Yeah, the Iron Warriors split into two major groups, the ones loyal to Perturabo and ones that hated him. Some of the ones that hated him even fought alongside loyalist Astartes at a point of the heresy. Ah, okay. Heart of Blood is a hard name. Pretty metal. Like, yeah, the corn demons always look very cool. Very aesthetically pleasing.
Honshu rushed to descend down to the chamber in a hopeless attempt to re-secure the demon, but before they could even reach a safe exit from the caged elevator, the psychic barrier surrounding the fortress was broken. They crashed out of the elevator with Rockcrete tumbling down, instantly crushing half of Honshu's Iron Warriors who accompanied him. Meanwhile, Colonel Leonid, Uriel and Pausanias had observed the bizarrity of the demon summoning what appeared to be an Iron Warrior from a warp portal, which bestowed onto him armor which attached itself to the great demon. The individual wearing the armor was not a Chaos Marine at all, but even more strangely, a guardswoman. And at that, a guardswoman of the same regiment as the Colonel. He was determined against whatever would happen to him to rescue her, and he somehow managed to drag her back to safety with the Ultramarines. Her rusted dog tags named her as Lieutenant Lorana Utorian. The joy of finding someone of his own homeworld here and now seemed like a miracle on behalf of the Emperor himself. "Maybe the God Emperor didn't want me to die alone without someone from the homeworld," he exclaimed, to which Uriel nodded. "Perhaps you're right, my friend. If a man has to die, it should be among friends." Meanwhile, outside the city, Toromino and his Iron Warriors were tearing ferociously into the battlements, laying siege to it with ordnance, sorcerers and columns of soldiers, including an entire grand company of Iron Warriors, led by the Lord himself. Thousands of warriors who sought to completely annihilate Honshu and his forces from this place. The sheer power of the artillery hitting Kalang Gaul was felt deep here in the chamber, yet something more came. The demon that had brought them to this place and that Uriel had tried to betray would emerge. The great demon of Khorne was expecting its eternal nemesis, and soon they would be fighting a furious battle that, if the assault above ground had not already ensured the destruction of Kalang Gaul, then the combined battles above and below ground, one being of material, another of immaterial, it was a certainty that the time of this place and its horrors was now severely limited.
You know what? Female Chaos Marines actually sounds more likely. Female Chaos Marines? Oh, goodness. Oh, my goodness. Well, we're headed that direction, right? Female Space Marines, now we're gonna get female Chaos Marines? Yeah.
Uriel knew they had to get out of here if they had any hope of ever surviving.
Very
they looked to
heretical.
Leonid, telling him that it was time to go. But Leonid refused.
He knew he had no time remaining. The cancerous diseases the Dark Mechanicus had infected him with since he came here had taken all that was left of him by this point, and Laurana was already fading away. Uriel was once again torn by knowing this was inevitable, but tortured at having to leave another loyal servant of the Emperor behind. Uriel looked upon this brave warrior of the Imperium, saying, "Die well, Leonid. If we survive, I will light a candle for your soul to find its way home." Leonid said nothing. He was cradling Laurana Utorian's wasted frame. As the Ultramarine renegades ran from the chamber, behind them, Colonel Leonid and Lieutenant Utorian of the 383rd Duran Dragoons held each other and waited for death. Yet even as they sat together slumped, tears running down his cheeks, as he looked upon the exhausted Laurana Utorian, he thought how fitting it was that they would die together, the last warriors of the 383rd. He recalled to his mind the last time they had all fought together, at the fall of the Citadel on Hydra Caudatus. Despite its fall, the Guard had been magnificent. The battling demons caught his eye, and even as they battered each other with ever-increasing ferocity, the demon, known to Uriel, had caught sight of the escaping Ultramarines. "No," it cried out, "you do not escape my vengeance so easily." Leonid cried out as he saw the demon unleash lesser demons to chase after the Ultramarines. "No!" shouted an enraged Leonid. "You will not have them!" He pulled his uniform jacket from his skin and slashed the edge of Laurana's dog tags over a swollen cancel on his neck. Blood spilling down his jacket, its corrupted stench filled the air. "Over here, demon spawn!" he yelled. "This is what you want!" As soon as they had caught the scent, their gaze fixated on the guardsmen. They swiftly turned and shot towards them. They desired such sickening delicacies. He drew something from his pocket while Laurana continued whispering in her madness, "All dead, all dead, all dead, all dead." As the demonic mists enveloped them, Leonid agreed, "Yes, we are." The demons bit and tore at their flesh, and Leonid cried out in pain. He caught the last vestiges of sanity held by Laurana as their eyes met, and with that, he detonated the grenade he had taken from the pulping machine next to the wretched Iron Warrior Obax. The blast consumed them, vaporizing themselves and the demons instantly in the white-hot heat of the melter grenade's blast.
Oh, very nice.
Uriel and Pausanias had unfortunately run into Honsu and his retinue as they attempted to escape this pit of horror. Honsu was more than satisfied to kill them both on the spot. The Ultramarines had no intention of going down so easily. Yet Honsu, a Chaos Marine with an unending smugness, the kind of figure who had an answer for everything and never imagined that he himself could be undone, was unfazed by the rationalizations of Uriel regarding his failure and the fact that his proud fortress was failing all around him. Both Marines charged forward, but inevitably they were struck down by bolter rounds soon after, hitting the ground hard. Pausanias was hit too, but when he deflected, he was able to drag down one of the Iron Warriors, breaking his neck with an audibly loud cracking. Yet suddenly, when things seemed inevitably hopeless, screaming of these traitors blessed the ears of the Ultramarines. It didn't take long for Uriel to understand what was happening, and soon the blood of the traitors was spraying all around them as bodies of the Iron Warriors slumped to the ground, their stumped necks pouring sickly copper floods onto the floor. Uriel cheered triumphantly as a familiar voice was heard.
Thank you.
"Iron Men, die!"
Oh,
It
the
was the Lord of the
fleshies!
Unfleshed and the other surviving creatures who descended on Honsu and his Iron Warriors like they themselves were a possessed force of fury and absolute vengeance. Honsu had forged these sad half-Astartes from their abhorrent flesh wombs, and now he would feel the wrath of the innocents. Honsu's right hand, the possessed Iron Warrior Onyx, who had originally captured Uriel and his companions, still moved with unnatural speed, dodging and escaping the bludgeoning swings of the Unfleshed. Pausanias was near death, and as Uriel lined up a shot on Honsu as he lay on the ground, smoke and falling rubble obscured his view. He had to make this count, but as he fired, crashing rubble exploded near to him. He lost sight of Honsu, but he was sure that just before, he had seen the fiend of Kalang Gaul's armoured helmet explode in a starburst shower of ceramite and crimson. The mighty battle between the demons wore on, both raging and roaring, storms of blood whipping like a hurricane around the chamber, lashing anything it touched so severely that the Ultramarines, Iron Warriors and Unfleshed all sought cover from its raging tempest of unnatural bloodstorm. Finally,
Jesus
the Heart of Blood,
Christ.
the great demon of Khorne, would beat its nemesis into complete submission, decapitating it with a mighty swing from its demonic axe. Roaring so loudly it tore into the warp itself. It consumed the powers from its ancient foe and lay gorging on its essence. Uriel surveyed the chamber, and much to his satisfaction, the demons had nearly destroyed everything that once stood here, and that included the vast surgery chambers, the DAEMONCULABA cages, the
Thank
DAEMONCULABA
God.
themselves, all had been obliterated. All that remained of them were crushed piles of flesh. There was nothing to rejoice over, but their death oath had been fulfilled against all odds. They had completed the orders of their chapter master Marnius Kalgar. By now some of the Iron Warriors of Honsu were staggering to their feet. The unfleshed lord turned to Uriel, pointing at them. "Meat," it exclaimed. Uriel nodded in agreement. Meat. The finest Iron Warriors of Honsu in their bedraggled state couldn't survive the furious savagery of the unfleshed, who sought to continue to make the Emperor happy as they ripped these traitors to pieces and crushed their heads with mighty fists. The ground soon littered with Iron Warrior dead, armour smashed open, limbs ripped from their sockets, and then of course the unfleshed began feasting on the still living bodies of their creators that they hated with every fibre of their being. Only the possessed one, Onyx, remained, and despite his speed and lacerating blows, the unfleshed ignored this until he was surrounded, pinned down, kicking and screaming while they tore him apart. Uriel and Brother Pausanias looked to each other. "Our honour is restored," said Uriel. "I don't think we ever lost it," came Pausanias. "If only we could tell them on Macragge, but I don't suppose they'll ever hear what happened." "No," said Pausanias, "I don't suppose they will. But we know, and that is enough." Despite being trapped on a hellish demon world within the Eye of Terror, the simple scale of their achievement and its virtues were all they needed right now. Their oath was fulfilled, the nightmare was over. They noted that the portal of the demon nemesis of the Heart of Blood was still open. The unfleshed lord suggested they use it. To stay here was to invite inevitable death. They concluded the same and all decided they were best off out of this chamber and set about making for the portal with haste. Honsu came around. He thought he'd been killed, but evidently not. His helmet had taken severe damage and his face filled with clotted blood, but he lived. He had greatly underestimated the unfleshed abominations, never imagining them to hold so much power and determination, and also the Ultramarines and their renegades, which on reflection would have been better off to be killed during their first meeting and be done with it. A few of his warriors lived, but some of the mightiest, including the previously possessed Onyx, were shattered and worthless. Honsu marched up to the gigantic demon, kicking it awake. "Hey! You're free, and sorcerers to kill. Up!" The Heart of Blood smelled a demonic touch on Honsu. It sensed he had once been blessed by his kind. Honsu declared to it that above ground, powerful sorcerers sought to destroy this fortress. Being a demon of Khorne, the opportunity to crush those using foul sorcery could not be overlooked. Honsu stated again, "Out there is a warlord who commands the host attacking my fortress. He has many magickas. I will kill him and rend his soul for eternity." The giant lumbering monstrosity raged as it smashed through the tears in the mountain, disappearing to unleash its rage upon the psykers of Toromino. Honsu laughed to himself as it disappeared out of sight. The Ravengard Marine, who left Uriel, Brother Pausanias, and Colonel Leonid to die,
So he's
sat
just
in his
still
empty
alive.
bunker, reflecting on the events that had come to pass. He cursed the lie of honour, the lie that cast him from his chapter, and the lie that saw him near death on this miserable planet. He hated the Ultramarines captain that had slaughtered near all of his fellow Marines. Honour, what use was it when all it rewarded you with was suffering? He and the bare few other Marines who had left Uriel to his fate had sat atop the mountain, watching the annihilation take place below them. First they had witnessed Toromino's army of the Iron Warriors lay siege to Kalang Gaul, only to then bear witness to something they never imagined. 4 days of endless raging slaughter as the demon the Heart of Blood had come rampaging out from the mountain. Nothing could stand against it as it killed and killed and killed. Anything that challenged it died, its axe its sheer size crushing, rending and splitting its enemies. Toromino's army was entirely broken. Honsu of the Iron Warriors was the ruler of Kalang Gaul once again. But what would he and his renegades do now? This was soon answered when a former Space Wolf Marine, one of his few remaining brothers, had them step outside. An Iron Warriors Land Raider had stopped off on the horizon. Such a powerful support vehicle could have destroyed them easily, but instead the Chaos Marines disembarked and began marching toward the Renegade's bunker. As they revealed themselves, it turned out that Honsu himself was visiting them. But to what end? Honsu spoke with them. "You carry great bitterness within you, warrior, but you're a fighter, a survivor." The Ravengard replied, And I need men like you now.
No.
Most of my own grand company are dead.
I offered Uriel Ventress the chance to join me, but he spat it back at me. I now offer you the same chance, but I do not think you'll do the same. You want us to fight for you? The Raven Guard replied. Yes, said Honsu. For what purpose? For conquest, for war and blood, and to take revenge on our enemies. My champion is dead, said Honsu. I need someone like you to train his newborn replacement in the art of death. The Iron Warrior beside Honsu removed his helmet, and the Raven Guard Marine gasped in shock as he saw the face that was revealed. It had new skin that was ashen and ill-fitting, raw sutured wounds ringing his neck and jawline, but there was no mistaking his features or the storm cloud grey of his eyes.
If a man dedicates his life to good deeds and the welfare of others, he will die unthanked and unremembered. If he exercises his genius bringing misery and death to billions, his name will echo through the millennia for 100 lifetimes. Infamy is always preferable to ignominy. Ignominy. That's it. Wow. Holy smokes. We did it! Yeah. I don't know. Should I be clapping? I mean, we got through it, but also what the fuck? What? Wow. I wonder, like, what it looked like, the people who were writing this, what that looked like when they were bouncing ideas off of each other. And trying to make it all, you know, make sense, right? Oh, we're gonna have these guys and they're gonna have their flesh, like, so stretched out, and then, like, their flesh is, like, used to reskin these, like, babies. Yeah, put him in a woman, like, whole guy, just shove him in there. Yeah, that's... And then have him fight his way out, and it was, like, in such detail, too. It was, like, pulsating, and then when he would scream, it was just, like, jelly and blah, blah, jelly in his blah, flesh jelly in his blah. Gross. FYI, the book isn't that good. Oh no, really? The DAEMONCULABA book, it's not very good? Would you say Luton did a better job of talking about it than the book did? This is blue screen of death part, huh? Yes? Ah, that was the abbreviated version. It doesn't have the end of the Lord of the Unfleshed. He went out like a champ. Did he go out like a champ?
You know the tragic ending in Of Mice and Men? Well, something akin to that happened in 40k once. In the aftermath of destroying the DAEMONCULABA, Uriel Ventress stands in a room with the Unfleshed Lord, a mentally slow being born of the DAEMONCULABA, twisted and warped, the last of its kind. Childlike and sad, the creature lamented its putrid, unforgivable existence.
Unfleshed bad,
said the sad, deformed creature.
No,
Protested Uriel.
unfleshed not bad. You were used. It wasn't your fault. Emperor must hate us now.
Cried the decrepit
Aww.
thing.
The Emperor does not hate you. He loves you. Look.
Uriel said as he pointed towards the reflection on a makeshift Aquila. The monster looked into it and saw not himself but what appeared to be a handsome young man. The disfigured aberration cried with happiness, briefly seeing itself not as a gargantuan flesh mound of muscle and horror, but as something lovable and beautiful. Tears fell down its broken face as it shouted,
Emperor loves me. Emperor loves me.
Uriel, standing behind the gleeful abomination, raised his gun to the back of its head.
Yes, the Emperor loves you.
You know the tragic ending in
Wow! What? Wow! Aww. Just look at the flowers. Ugh. He was a good boy. Damn. Very sad. I still leave it like... Okay. So I can get more Warhammer on my feed. so subscribe and like, please. More Warhammer on my feed.